Sorry about that. Hey guys, how you doing? Helg, Aladdin, Anthony, uh, Daron. Sorry, I'm probably butchering all these names. For whatever reason, my sound was off. That's fine. I'll go through all the stuff I was talking about before. It's not a big deal, and then I'll cut this out in the post. All right, so I was rambling on about the minor changes that I added to the application in between the two streams. So in the last stream, we implemented the CRUD for the actual rooms, which we're going to wire up with channels eventually, hopefully in this stream. And in between the two streams, I decided to add a navbar, which is this piece of HTML, and the navbar just has a link inside of it that links back to the index of our application. And then I also re-added the get flashes. Now these are normally just built into the app.html layout, and for whatever reason I had removed them yesterday, but I decided to add them back in here. So when we get a flash that we put on the connection, it will show up at the top of our page. And we have two types of flashes, the info flash and the error flash. And yeah, we want to be able to display both of them, so I added this back in. Second phone ringing. Don't want you guys to hear that. All right. Along with all that, I also on the index, I added a icon, and I made it so that if you hover over the icon, it will show the room's description. And so this is just a little trick of JavaScript and a little bit of the Elixir, or rather the Phoenix templating engine. So you just check to see if the room description exists and if it's not an empty string. And then we generate a div, and we have this data toggle tooltip. And then we use some jQuery in here to make that data toggle show the tooltip. And I can actually show you guys this in action. So on the front page here, the Elixir chat room has a description, and if we hover over it, you can see it says a new Elixir chat room. And here we're using a font awesome icon, and yeah, so this looks a little bit better than what we ended up with. I also took a few of you guys' suggestions and turned off the Phoenix CSS, so I just removed it from our app.css. So this is all Bootstrap 4. Nothing really crazy going on, but it's nice enough to show off the application. All right, so I guess that's all I really want to talk about in that regard. Yeah, React Native, Vue, and all that stuff is the future. I'm not really going to cover that right now, and we're not doing Flutter today. We're doing Phoenix. I want to focus on Phoenix, so we're not going to worry about any kind of front-end client-side stuff. We're just using the templating engine, but normally, if you're going to make a Phoenix application, you'd probably want to consider using some kind of front-end technology, or you'd want to use like a some sort of server-side rendering. For the future, I'll probably never do any Vue or React Native. Just period. Not interested. JavaScript is just not a thing I'm not going to do on this channel ever. Period. Alright, so to get started here, we want to create our authentication, and that's going to involve creating our users module, our user schema rather. So we need a schema for Ecto so that our Postgres database will be able to store the users. And yeah, so we'll generate it from the command line, and I'm going to use the Phoenix generator for this. So we put in the name of the module that we want to create, and I'm going to call this thing accounts.user, and the schema's name will be users, plural. Then the, let's see, we want an email, and we want this to be unique, if I can spell. Then we want the username, and we'll have this be unique. And then we also, final thing that we need is a password hash. So, and all of these by default will be strings, so we don't have to actually put in the types. And let's generate that. So there we go. We get our migration and we get our accounts user file. Let's take a look at these. So they'll be in our chat app accounts user.ex. So now we've got the schema here and our change set. And yeah, and of course we've got our migration, which we do need to modify, I think. So let's come in here. We want to make sure that the email, the username, and the encrypted hash, or the hashed password rather, are not null. So we need to add null false to all of these, and I'll just copy it over like that. Yeah, and that's, I think, all we really need to do for this one. Notice we've got these two create unique indexes here. Last time we put this in manually for our rooms, so we had it create a unique index for the room, for the name field rather. In this case, we're creating one for both email and username. And that's what that unique keyword did for us. So now we can just go ahead and run mix ecto migrate. And then that will change our database properly. If it actually works, what's the problem here? It says it already exists. Well, that's not nice. Let me pull up pgadmin, see what's going on. I did test this, but I didn't run the migration, so I actually tested if I wanted to put in a context or a schema, and I didn't run a migration, so I'm not sure why it's there. I guess I could roll back the migration, so, or I could just drop the database and re-migrate everything. So here we dropped everything, and I'll rerun the migration, and then it should work. No, it failed again. What's the issue? Oh, apparently Postgres is not working. That's might be the problem. Let me restart it. Let's see. So I'll just take a second. Well, that's one of the things I don't like about Windows. If you want to restart something like this, you have to go actually into the services. Especially if you're running Postgres as a service like this. Anyway, let's see. Ecto.drop. Let's see. Well, let's let us drop everything. All right, so we've dropped the entire database, which is fine. So now we can run create, and then we can rerun migrate and see if this works. Perhaps. Okay, so this should be fine. I was thinking that maybe when I ran that context, it somehow left some files over, but I guess it didn't. It didn't leave a migration or something like that. So this should work. I do have another hunch though. Maybe the unique indexes should work too. So I don't know. Find out what's happening. All right, there we go. So something was going on. I have no idea what it was. Probably the Postgres not working was the main issue. All right, so I'm going to rerun the server, and we'll go back to our editor and start doing all this. This also means that we've lost our rooms, but that's not a big deal. We can always re-add them. All right, so let's exit out of these. And what we're going to do here is create a session controller. And this will be a controller that will allow us to sign in and sign out. And then we'll create another controller, an authentication controller for registering the user and all that stuff. All right, so in controllers, make this session controller. Let's see. And we're going to need this piece here. All right, so let's create the index function, or actually we don't need an index function, but we do need a new function which will act as our sign in, or let's see. New will be our sign in, create will be the session creation. So we don't need the parameters, so it's just passing in the connection. Parameters can be anonymous, and then we'll just render con and our a new.html template. Along with this, we're also going to need a view. So in views, let's create session view. And I'll just grab page view, copy it, and change it to session view like that. All right, and let's create our new.html. So templates, new folder, session, and new.html.ex, and I'll just put an h1 tag in here, and I'll just say login. And yeah, let's see if we can navigate over there. So actually, we can't navigate over there yet because we didn't set up the route. So let's set up the route real quick. The way I want this router to work, so we're going to use resources again. Instead of adding everything individually, we'll say resources, and we're putting this on sessions, session controller, and we want to say only new and create for now. We may add a few others. Oh, and I spelled resources wrong. We may add delete to this as well later, but for now, just new and create is what we need. Okay, let's go back to the browser. So now we should be able to go session new, sessions new rather. And there we go. So we get our login page. Of course, we want to add a form to this login page. So let's go ahead and do that. And by the way, guys, if I'm going quickly, it's mainly because I want to cover all of the stuff in this video. I don't really want to end up like last time and end up not covering everything. So this will be an auth form wrapper, and we're going to use that. You know, actually, I should probably just grab the form from our room and then just modify it. So grab this piece here all the way down to here, and I'll put this in here, and this way we can modify it. So we're going to have not the change set, we're going to have the connection being exposed in here, and then the action will be for session path create. So routes.session path at con create, and we want to add some optional parameters. So we want to say as session, we'll add our class in here, and let's make it form sign in, I think is valid bootstrap, and then we'll have our function f anonymous function, which will be our entire form. All right, so then I'm going to grab this H1 and actually bring it inside of the form. So what I can do is just create a div in here. Let's just say text center. And we'll put the login right there. Oops. And okay, so we want to have an input for email, and then we want to have a input for password. So we can replace the name here. So let me just use the search functionality, and I'll replace name with email like this. And then I'll replace description with password like that. And let's see, do we want to do anything else? I guess we want to add some placeholders here. So placeholder, email address, ... something like that. And I can do the same for password as well. Oh, this is a label, sorry. This should be on the input text, not the label. Like that. Let's copy this over. Like that. And let's see, that should be alright. Of course, we want to change this to password instead of email. Let's see, what else do we want to do? So error tag will keep. Input text will keep. For the password, we can still use form control. Oh yes, we also want to add required true, and then autofocus for the email to be true, and then we'll have required as true for the password, but not autofocus. So when we come onto the page, it'll autofocus onto the top box. All right, and let's see. So this is what it looks like now. Yeah, that's pretty competent. We still have our box, but maybe I should change that to say sign in instead of submit. So let's just do that. Sign in, like that. And there we go. All right. So of course, if I submit this, it's not going to work because we don't have create. So let's go ahead and make that. So back in the sessions controller, I'll say dev create con and do. I don't know why my stuff isn't working. So the sign in functionality here, we want to find a session here. So we want to pattern match on the params and find the session. It's going to look something like this. It's going to be a nested map. It's going to be session, and then this will have the email, which will be our email, and then the password in it, like this. And yeah, and then we can use this, and we can create a function called auth sign in. So case, and actually not auth, but accounts dot, is it accounts or account? Yeah, accounts, sign in, and this will be our accounts context that we'll create. And we pass in our email and password, and then we'll say, okay, user, get that back, take the connection, we'll put a session, so this will put the current user ID, user.id, into the browser so that we can bounce it around our connection, and then put flash like this, info, you've signed in, and then we want to redirect to routes.room path con index, like that, and then if we have an error, and a reason, which we don't really care about, we'll just take the connection, put flash, error, invalid, email or password like this, and render, we'll re-render new.html. Alright, so of course this is going to throw errors because we haven't created accounts, so let's sign in. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go into chat up here, make a new file, call this accounts.ex, and our module here, I don't know why my auto-completion isn't working. So chat app dot accounts. I may have to reload VS Code. Anyway, it's not a big deal. Chat app dot repo is what we're going to need because we want to interact with the repository, and then chat app dot accounts dot user, which is of course the schema that we just created. And sign in, we'll take in the email and the password, and we're just going to say user equals repo.get by. We're going to get the user by their email, so user email like that. And then we can have a cond do block, and we can check to see if the user exists, and the user has a, what do we call it, hashed password? Should be password hash, that's it. So the user has a password hash, and that is equal to the password that we're passing in here. If it's true, then we'll pass back OK in the user. Otherwise, for any other case, we'll pass back an error and unauthorized like that. And yeah, this is bugging me, not having auto-completion and all that stuff, so let me fix that real quick. Just gonna restart Elixir. If I can find the instance of Elixir. There it is. Alright, let's restart it. I don't know why ABD is running. Alright, let's see what you guys are talking about. So, well, a lot of conversation going on here. Ah yes, a lot of Flutter going to be happening in the future. Playlist Elixir++, congratulations, Mix Ecto RO, you're teaching how to build a better APIs for Flutter developers. Rollback and migrate, yes, you can combine the two commands like that. I didn't, but whatever. I don't work with Linux because I'm actually a gamer. Now granted, that's a pretty flimsy reason, especially these days. But yeah. No, I'm not a beginner with Phoenix. I've been working with Phoenix for years now. You need to create seed, how fixtures data, help. I don't need seed data for this particular app. But if I was going to have a lot of data, then I might do seed data. Will I make a Flutter app with a Phoenix backend at some point? Yes, of course. I think I've done Rust and I've done Go, so it makes sense to do Phoenix at some point. What I'll probably do is like GraphQL and Flutter, because I do want to cover GraphQL at some point with Elixir and with Flutter. Alright, so let's see if this is working. It seems that it's not. So what I'm going to do is just restart. What is it, reload window? Yeah, there. Just have it reload the window. And while we're doing that, let's go into the terminal and create a user. So we can test how this works by aliasing. Let's see. Let me zoom in a bit. So we want to alias chat app dot accounts dot user, and let's alias chat app dot account, and we'll alias chat app dot repo, and then we can just do user. So we can create a user structure, and then we can take that user and go user.change set. Let's pass in an email. So I'm just going to say test@test.com, and let's pass in a, what was it, a password hash? Sorry, I'm being extremely dyslexic. I keep forgetting whether or not it's password hash or hashed password. Let me see. It's password hash. Alright, so I got that. I'm just going to put in password because we don't have any encryption yet. We'll have some in a second. And then username will just be Tensor, of course. Just use my name. And then we can pipe this into just a call to repo.insert, like that. Let's see. Alright, so that seems to work. We've got the user test@test.com. That's the email and the username in here, and then the password hash is just the plain text. All right, and let's see. Let's go back to our application. Now that VS Code is reloaded, it should be all right. Notice, of course, we've got our error here because we're not aliasing the accounts file that we just created. So let's go ahead and do that so that we can access accounts sign in. So chat app.accounts, like that. That should resolve the error, unless there's something else going on. Okay. Apparently there are too many end statements. That doesn't seem right. Got an end for this, got an end for this, and oh, yes, we are missing an end keyword for the module. Alright. So that should be alright. Now everything should work in that regard. Let's go to our application. So now let's sign in with test@test.com and password. And there we go. So that actually worked. So we're good to go on that. Let's I guess let's display the username on the page when the user logs in. So let's go over here again, and I'm going to zoom back in because that zoomed out. All right, so we're going to go to Layout App, and we're going to put the username inside of the nav bar. So what we can do here is after this H3, we can just say if chat app.account.user signed in, and this is a function that we can create. We pass in the con do. Let's make the end statement here, and then what we'll just do is create a nav with let's just create a nav. Just a normal good old nav, and then we'll say signed in as, and then let's have some strong, and then we can just say let's see, it'd be chat app dot account dot current user, again another function that we can create. Pass in the con, and then call username to get the username, and yeah. So this is going to throw an error, of course, because we don't have those functions. So let's, and of course, there you go. You can see it's telling us that we don't have user signed in, question mark, and we don't have the other one either. So let's create those real quick. They're actually fairly simple. So if we go into accounts, let's see, user signed in. It's just a single line function, so we can just say if not current user con, and then current user is the other function that we're going to create. So current user takes in the connection, and all it's really going to do is go into the repository. So we just say user ID equals, or no, we're not going to go into the repository. We're going to use the plug connection to get this session that we set earlier. We're going to get the user, what do we call it? Current user ID, like that. And then now we can use this user ID. We can say if user ID do repo.get user ID, like that. And let's see, did that resolve the problem? It should. Or did I forget to put a question mark or something? Set up accounts. Oh, accounts, that's why. I put account rather than accounts here. Let's put those in. Alright, so there we go. Let me flip over the screen so that you guys can see this. There we go. You can see up in the top nav, we got that black text. It's hard to see because it's black. I'll make it white here in a moment. But it just says signed in as Tensor. Let me add the white text so that you guys can see the thing. I believe it's just, what, text light or something? Yeah, text light is the class that we want to add to our text. So I'm just going to put it on the strong. Let's see. No, I'm not going to put it on the strong. I want to put it on the nav. There we go. So now it says sign in as Tensor, and we can actually see it. All right, cool. So that works. Nice. All right. So yeah, you can see the actual selector that I created. It's not a big deal. All right, so now we want to create sign out. Just go to the router again, and this time we'll just create a explicit route. It's just going to be delete, and we'll have it be on sign out. And again, session controller and delete is the function name. So for this, what we can do is we can use the user signed in function that we just created to determine whether or not we're signed in, and then present the user with a button that will allow them to sign out. So let's go back to app here, and we can wrap, well, we're already using this, so we've already got all this wrapped in here. We've got our nav in here, and then down below the nav we can just create a new link like this. We can just link sign out. We'll have this point to routes.session lowercase session path at con delete. And let's see, we want to have method delete class. Let's just make it btn outline primary, like that. Alright, so that should make a big old blue button in the middle of our thing, right below our username. And of course, if we click it, it'll fail. So let's resolve that. We need to go into our session controller and create a delete function. And before we do that, actually, let's just go into our accounts file and create a function that will sign the user out. So sign out just takes the connection. And for this, all we really need to do is just take our plug connection and then just remove the session that we added. So it's just con drop true. So this just drops the session map, which is just this little key and then the associated user ID. So, and that will sign the user out once we pipe it through our delete function. So delete takes in the connection and then the params, and then we're just going to go con accounts dot sign out, and then we'll say redirect to routes.room path con index, like that. And let's see if this works now. If I click sign out, all right, so it's looking for a post. That shouldn't be right. It should delete should be fine. And let me think. Did I make a mistake here? I shouldn't have. I don't know why it's trying to, hang on, let me check this CSS. I don't know why it's trying to post when I specifically told it that I wanted a delete method. And in fact, it does say data method delete, so I don't know. Let me go and look at the code. Let's flip back over. All this seems fine. Let's look at the router real quick. Router, we have delete on the sign out route. Seems fine. Let me just wrap it like this. Not that that really matters, and in fact, that'll throw an error. And the rest of the code should be alright. Let's see. In fact, actually, let me look at the error that it threw. Let's see. Chat app endpoint handler was undefined. Okay, that doesn't really have anything to do with what we're doing. No route found for post sign out. Maybe if I just change the delete to a post. I don't really think that that's necessary though, but let's try it. Maybe I typed something wrong in the HTML. Anyway, let's see if this works now. Alright, so that works. If I change it to a post, it works. That shouldn't matter. A delete should work. Still, I mean, anyway, let me check it real quick. Make sure I've typed this in properly. It's in app.html. Let's see. Method delete. Yeah. Oh, no wonder. Delete. Like that. Okay. That's our problem. Sorry about that. Dyslexia strikes again. So, let's sessions new, sign back in, and sign out. All right, good. All right, I thought I was going insane there. So now that we can sign in, sign out, let's go ahead and bring in our encryption. So I'm going to use come on in, which gives us bcrypt hashing. Let's come on here and get these two. So we need to get come on in and then bcrypt Elixir. Let's see. Let me actually go to hex.pm, which is the package management place where you find all your packages for Elixir. So let's type in come on in like this. We'll get it. So we just need come on in 5.1. and I'll put that in our mix file. So mix.exs down here, and we're also going to need bcrypt Elixir, which is 2.0, like that, and we'll save it. It's going to throw an error because it won't be able to compile all this properly. And the way that we resolve this is by using the MSVC compiler. There's actually a little code I can type, and I'll show you in the terminal here. Let's see. So on Windows, yeah, this can be a bit of a pain. On Linux, it's actually easier to do, of course, and on Mac, you probably won't have the same kind of problems either. But yeah, such is the life of a Windows developer. All right, so the command that I'm going to run is command \k program files Microsoft Visual Studio Code, and of course I need to have Visual Studio Code installed. I have 2017. This command is actually in the come on in documentation. You can use the run box. What it does is it just opens up a Visual Studio developer command prompt with like the C compilers and all that stuff. And so now I can do mix deps.get to get the dependencies, of course, that we just added. And now I can just go mix compile, and this should go ahead and compile bcrypt, which is the big part with the C code inside of it that was not compiling properly. And you can see here it's actually running all these C compilers. Once that's done, though, there is one more thing that we need to do for the actual Elixir, the Elixir ls extension to actually realize that it's been compiled properly and get rid of this error. And that is to come to this build folder, take this bcrypt Elixir and the come on in folder, and we probably only need bcrypt Elixir because it's got the C compilation inside of it, whereas come on in doesn't have it, I don't think. I think this is all Beam, yeah. That's all Beam, whereas bcrypt has some C stuff in it anyway. Yeah, see some DDLs and stuff. All right, so we copy this, and we want to just put it into this elixir.ls file, because this one tried to compile it without the C compiler, and it failed. Like if you look in here, like there's nothing in the folder. And so if we move this one over, it'll use the properly compiled version. So that's what I'll do. Just reveal it in Explorer and just copy it over. Anyway, if you ever run into this type of error, that's how you resolve it. Frankly, I think that they should make it easier to do, because, I mean, not that this is hard, but it would just be nicer if didn't have to do this every time. But whatever, it's not a huge deal. All right, so now that should work, and this should get rid of its error eventually. Let's see, let's close it and reopen it, and the error should be gone. The main reason why I want to get rid of the error is if the error is going on, yeah, it's gone. If the error keeps going, then it can mess with your Elixir plugin. Anyway, all right, so this should work now. Let's see. I'm gonna rerun the Phoenix server. So just iex-s mix Phoenix server. I'm not gonna go back to the command line to show you guys this. Anyway, there is one thing that I do want to change. It keeps telling me that got a equals here that doesn't need to be there. So when you put the ends like this, you can just put the you don't have to put an equals. Yeah, so, and it'll bitch and moan about it if you do. Anyway, all right, so let's see. I guess we could go into IEX. So let's go into the terminal and let's see if come on in works. So I want to go and say chat app.repo.get by chat app.accounts.user, comma email, and it's test@test.com, like this. I know that it seems like this is broken up, but it's really not. There we go. So fix the formatting there, and then we're just going to go chat app.repo.delete to delete it. And yeah, that way we can reinsert it with our come on in call. So I believe this is just bcrypt dot hash password salt. Is that it? Yes, there are underscores instead. So it should be bcrypt hash password salt, like this, and then you pass in the password that you want to hash. So like if I want to hash password, oh, of course, I forgot the D. There we go. So that's what our hashed password would look like. So we know that works. So we can just say chat app.accounts.user, create the struct, and then we say chat app.accounts.user.changeset, and let's create our email. So test@test.com, and our password, and it's password hash rather, or actually before we do this, what I wanted to do is just bind this to a variable. So bind this to password so that we can insert it into the database. And let's see if I can just, do I have these aliases again? Yeah, so I can just call these aliases, make this easier on us. All right, so now I can just say user, then we're just gonna call accounts.user.changeset, put in our email and password and stuff. Password hash, it's just going to be password, and then user name, just Tensor, like this, and then we'll call repo.insert. There we go. So that now works, and it's now in our database. Alrighty. Of course, if we try to sign in, this is not going to work, so let's go ahead and fix that, because it's not using the encryption. So let's flip back over to our editor and deal with this. So we're doing this inside of the accounts sign in function. So right up here. We want to essentially replace this piece here with, I believe it's bcrypt dot check password, like this, and just password, and then user dot hash, or password hash. So what it does is it will check the password that we're passing in. Is it check password? No, check pass. All right, so we can call it bcrypt check pass, pass in the password, and then pass in the password hash, and it will check the two together and see if they're this, they're derived from one another. So now if we go back to our app, we can see if this works really quickly. So let's do this real quick. All right, so sessions new. So test@test.com, password, sign in, and of course it works. So there we go, good to go. So while we're at it, let's create some registrations. So of course we want to be able to register the users. And I'm going to take a quick break and answer any questions you guys have. All right, so what have we got? Flutter, GraphQL, Phoenix, awesome. Yeah, it is. What do you think of Ecto as a database API outside of Phoenix? Ecto is great on its own. You don't need to use it with Phoenix. It's a very intuitive way to access any kind of database. I've used it with things like MongoDB, and I think there are some drivers for like Redis and stuff, which are fairly immature, but they can be pretty useful. For an API, GraphQL is necessary and awesome. I wouldn't say it's necessary, but it is certainly awesome. Aladdin says he's trying to achieve Elm GraphQL, GraphQL Phoenix, using Flutter with GraphQL to the backend, Flutter with GraphQL to connect to Phoenix backend. That's hell of a architecture, and it should be pretty useful once you get it going. We're using resources. Should we use only... Why use bcrypt when using come on in? So come on in is just the wrapper. Bcrypt is the algorithm that we're using. We're directly calling bcrypt because that's the easiest way to do what we want to do. Since you're a gamer, have you done much game programming? I've never written my own game engine. I have worked on actual tooling for gaming companies. I've worked with id Software. I've worked with not Bethesda, but Obsidian. And I've worked with a few other companies on their tooling. I probably shouldn't have actually name dropped those names, but whatever. I've worked with a few indie devs too. I've never actually built like full-scale games on my own. Of course, I can build things like Snake and puzzle games and Tetris and so on, but I've never like built my own engine or built like a RPG or something like that, except for like on like a TI-83 calculator. I'm more of a systems developer than like an actual game programmer. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I don't want you guys to really worry about it. All right, so we've got our sessions working. Now we want to go ahead and create a new controller here called registration controller. So the session just creates this session that sits in the browser cache, whereas the registration controller is what's going to allow us to actually register the user and put them in the database. So def module chat app web.registration controller. Again, my plugin doesn't seem to be working properly, but whatever. Maybe I should reset it again. Just give it a second. Alright, so that zoomed the hell out, but whatever, it's fine. Just want to make sure that Erlang is still running in the background. I mean, it should be. I'm running an instance of it. There should be a version that's running with Visual Studio Code. Alright, there we go. And I can actually reset it. So I shouldn't have actually reset the window. I should have just reset it Erlang. Anyway. Alright, so like all of our controllers, we just want to use chat app web controller. And in the router here, we want to add another resource. I'll just put this above the delete here. Oh, and Elixir LS crashed. Of course it did. Resources. And I'll just call this registration. Registration controller. We only want new and create again. So that will help quite a bit. And of course, since Elixir LS is not running, not formatting anything, whatever, it's not a big deal. So, all right, let's go into our app template, and I guess we want to add a sign up link in the navigation bar. So let's put this in down here. So link sign up to routes.registration path con new class btn outline primary, and let's kind of push it over. All right, and we'll probably add an else clause in here later so that you can't sign in if you're signed in, if you're already signed in, or sign up if you're already signed in, rather. So now let's go to our registration controller, and let me actually rename this so it's not capital, because that'll bug me. All right, new, take in the connection and the parameters. We just want to render con and new.html, and we're also going to put the connection in here, and I'll put it into a change set key, and then I'll create a create function just while we're in here, and just have it be empty. All right, so let's see. So here's what our app looks like now. We've got sign up. If I click it, obviously it's going to fail. Let's go sessions new, sign in real quick. That way we can mess around with this so that the buttons aren't all screwed up. And actually, I just want to push everything over to the left, essentially. So let's go back in here. And yeah, I'm just going to take all of this and just move it over with some a little bit of CSS, Bootstrap 4 stuff. Anyway, how should I do this? In case you guys haven't noticed, I'm not really like a big designer. My ability to design things is pretty limited. But that, you know, that's how it should be, right? If you're a developer, you're not a designer. I mean, unless you're gifted at doing a lot of things, but usually you're good at doing one thing or the other. All right, I think just use like my to MD like this. And this should push things over or not. No, I've got to push over, I think, the top level div. No, no, you know what? I'm not gonna worry about it too much. But I do want to add the else in here, so let's take this end. Oops, need to do that. Push it here, and then we'll put an else in here. So if we're signed in, we won't see the sign up button. And then if we sign out, we will see the sign up button. All right, and then we can add a login button later too. Let's close all these saved ones. I'm going to reset the window again so that I can see if I can get Elixir LS to run again. Oh, sorry, you guys probably didn't see the buttons and everything because I didn't switch back and forth. So, oops. So sessions new. Put in the test, whatever. Sign in. So you can see the button disappears, and now we have sign out. If I click sign out, now we have sign up. All right. Anyway, pretty basic stuff. Oh, right. We're also going to need our registration view. I forgot to make that. So let's go back in here. Inside of views, we're going to create a new file. So registration view. And again, we can just copy one of these, paste it in here, and just change the name. Like that. Excuse me. And we're going to need to create some layouts for registration. So new folder, and yeah, new.html.ex. This is going to have another form, and we can reuse the sign-in form, the session form. So we can go ahead and just grab this, paste it into registration. With registration, we're going to have the email, the username, and 2 password fields. So we can just reuse some of these fields. So auth form wrapper, passing in the con, we'll just call this change set because that's what we called it. We want to change this to registration path create. And instead of as session, as registration. Class will still be form sign in, and we'll still be passing around F. Then we have our div login. We'll have this just be sign up instead. All right. And actually, for our other form, we can remove the error tags because the session doesn't have any change set that it'll throw back any errors. But for this, we'll keep the error tags. So at the top, we'll have our email. Email can be exactly the same. Email address, all that stuff, autofocus, all that stuff is fine. For the next one though, we want to add this in here. Change this from password to username. And with username, change the placeholder. Something like that. And then down at the bottom we'll have a password and then a password confirmation. Hopefully I spelled that right. Anyway, and placeholder can be like confirm password, something like that. And yeah, we go to the sign up page. Now we have our big old form. So we have an email, username, password, and password confirmation, and it looks decent, which is nice. For the password stuff, oh yes, we can change these from text inputs to password inputs. That way you don't actually see the text. And I'll do the same for the new here. So just change this from a text input to a password input. And while I'm in here, I'll remove these error tags. That way we just don't see the user typing in the password. All right. So now we can sign up, sort of. We do need to add our create functionality though. So in the registration controller, we need to add create. And for this, we're going to get a map for the params. And actually, let's just inspect these params so I can show you what I'm talking about. But the map will just be registration, and it will have all of the registration params, which we can then just use. So if we go, oh, of course, you guys didn't see the editor while I was doing all this. Anyway, I guess you guys didn't see me change this to password input here and here and then here instead of a text input. That's all I really did. And then the registration controller, I just changed create to inspect params and con so that you could see the map for the params. when we pass in the form. All right, so email address, let's say test@gmail.com. Username will be like Metalman. Put in a password. I'll click sign in. And of course, we get empty. But if we go to our terminal emulator, you can see here that we have a fairly large map. Let's see. Where are we? So this is the connection. This is all the headers and stuff. It's down here that we're looking for. So you can see here we've got the token, the UTF-8 stuff, and then we have registration, which has email, password, password confirmation, and username. And notice that by default, Elixir will filter the passwords if they're password fields like this. So you can't even get them through IEX, which is nice. So it adds another layer of privacy to everything. All right, so let's jump back into VS Code and actually implement this thing. And let's see. We'll create a register function first. So go into accounts to create this. So just call this register, and we'll pass in the params. And we're just going to call user.registration change set, which is a change set that we'll create here, which will be distinct from the other change set that already is in there. And you'll see why when I create it. And then after we run it through the change set, we'll call repo.insert. So if we go over to the user, we can look at the change set. So currently the change set is validating email and password, and the password hash is being thrown in here, or email and username rather. We don't want the password hash to go through here. So we'll cast the email and the username. We'll have validation required for email and username. We can have a unique constraint for email and for username, and we can have a validation length. And we'll do that for the username. So validate length. And if we wanted to validate the email with like a regular expression, we would do it here. I'm not going to worry about that right now because this is really not important. Let's say our username can only be a min of 5 characters and a max of, say, 32. So we'll put that in there. We then also want to make our registration change set, which will be dealing with the password itself. So registration change set. This will take in the user and the adders. So again, we're just passing in a user struct, and I can actually take this and replace it up here too, just to make sure that we're passing in the appropriate structure. We'll take that user, and we're actually going to pass it through the change set here with the adders. And then we're going to, so it's still going through this change set, but it's also going through an extra step. So we're going to call validate confirmation for the password. That's it. So we're not even going to validate the password hash because it's not really important to do so. Cast the adders and the password, and validate length. Let's give the password a min length. Say 6 and a max of, say, I don't know, 100. Then we'll call encrypt password, which will be a function that we can create here. And let's create that real quick. So, whoa, what language am I using? All of a sudden I'm putting curly brackets. Anyway, encrypt password is going to take in the change set. So let's grab that word. And we'll say case change set do. And we want to check to see if that change set is an ecto change set. And with the Ector change set, it has a field in it called valid question mark. If this is true, then the changes in this change set are on the password. Then that means that we have what we actually want, and we can call put change. Take the change set, take the password, and we want to take this password and put it into our password hash field in the database. So, and the way that we'll of course do this, the value that we're putting in there is just calling bcrypt dot hash password salt to take the password and convert it into a hash. And then we need another case where we catch everything else. So for everything else, we'll just pass back the change set. That way we keep our functions pure, rather. Let's see. What's the issue here? You know what? I'll just remove this. I don't know why it's an issue. It shouldn't be. Oh, right. It's because I'm not aliasing user in here. That's why. So I just need to alias it. Of course, I could use the atom that you guys mentioned before. That's just underscore module. Frankly, I don't like doing that for this type of stuff because it's a little bit vague and it can be hard to understand. We also want to add some virtual fields in here. So since we have password fields, we can put this in here as a virtual field. And then we also have our password confirmation, which is also a string and it's also virtual. All right. And doing that will allow us to use them in the change set. So since we're using the password here, we can specifically reference it in the change set. What's going on here? Oh, I forgot the D again. That's fairly it's apparently a fairly frequent occurrence here. All right, so, and that should do it. That should actually, oh wait, no, of course it's not done. We didn't actually implement the create function in here. So we created the helper functions that we're going to need. Now we can go ahead and create the create function. So if we have the registration key in here, and then we can take that registration key and bind it to registration params, and we can then use it by calling case accounts dot register and then pass in those registration params. And of course we're going to need to alias the account so that we can access this function. So it's just chat app.accounts like that. And now let's see, this is just probably an error because we don't have the cases. So we need cases for if we get back OK and user. And we need a case for if we get back an error and the change set. For OK and user, we'll go con put session current user ID, user.id. So when we sign in, we want to create a session with the user ID in it so that we can actually sign the user in. So the user registers, they automatically get signed in. That's the idea. Now then we have put flash. We'll go make this an info flash. You've signed up and signed in, something like that. And then redirect. Maybe, you know, perhaps you could definitely make an argument that it's not a good idea to always sign the user in when they sign up, but whatever, that's what we're going to do this time. So going to redirect to the room path of index, so we'll go to the index of our app, and then for error, where we just get the change set, we'll re-render our con new.html, and we'll re-render it with our change set. And this is why we made the connection the change set in this case. So when we re-render it, it will refill out the form with the old values. So if the values failed, it'll put whatever values failed back in there, and then the user can go and edit them. Yes, okay, so that should do it. Let's flip over to our application and see. So let's see. Go to registration new. So test at Gmail, Metalman, password. Let's sign in. Save it. And there we go. So we've signed in, signed up, and we can sign out, and of course sign up again. Make another person, and even if I try to use the same emails and stuff, it'll tell us that this user already exists. So already been taken, and the same will go for the username as well. All right, cool. So we've got that working. All right. Let's see. So it's 7:52 Eastern time. I'm not sure we can really go much further, unfortunately. I tried to rush this too. So I guess I've got a lot that I want to cover that we're not going to really get to do. At least in this one, or in this video. I'm going to have to do yet another stream to finish this. Because I want to do some plugs so that we can specifically stop people from like getting to pages. Like for instance, right now as it is, I could go to any of the rooms. So like right now there are no rooms, and I can even create a room. So like general, I can create a room without being signed in. So being signed in has no bearing on whether or not I can create a room or go and view a room or even delete a room. And of course that's not good design. We want to make it so that if a user wants to create a room, they need to be signed in. If they want to delete a room, they need to be attached to that room, their user account, or they need to be some kind of what's it called? Administrator. I guess we can go for like another 20, maybe 30 minutes. And maybe that's enough time to get the plugs done. And if we can get the plugs done, then we'll have enough information to do in the next tutorial. We'll do channels and stuff. That way we can finally wire up our rooms and stuff like that. All right, so Aladdin says, I'd like to try to send you font to try. I hacked it to add ligatures, all the ligatures from Fira Code. Maybe give it a try. I'm actually using Fira Code right now. I also have, what is it called? Haskell-Lig, and I forget what the other one is. It's like a pretty expensive one. Prisma Code, something like that. Anyway, editor's not shown. You will find fonts in mail already. I don't know about that, man. I'm not really cool with hacked stuff like that. Anyway, I'm not gonna start adding fonts right now. Anyway, so let's create some plugs. So plugs are essentially just a layer that we can add to our Phoenix app, which allows us to inject something between the initial request and the response of the application. So when a user requests some information, we're allowed to grab that request, transform it in some way, and then send it back to the user, and vice versa. So like we can, of course, change all the requests both directions. So every Phoenix request starts with a connection, it goes down deep, and then it changes in some way. And so the plug is a piece of code that receives that connection, changes it slightly, and then returns it back. That's the cool thing about it. So, and of course, this makes plugs completely composable, because plugs take in a connection and then they return the connection. And they always do this. And so they're completely pure, and we can make like a big old pipeline of plugs. So generally there are two types of plugs. We have the init plug, and then we have module plugs and function plugs. We'll make a module plug, I think, what we'll do in this case. So we want to make a plug that will, let's see. So, we want to make a plug that will get the current user. So we want to be able to add the current user to the connection rather than using the session to always like query the user ID. So let's go ahead and do this. And what this will do is it will actually make it so that we can inject this type of behavior anywhere in our application. So let's go back to the editor. And what I'm going to do here is in the chat app web folder, I'll create a folder called plugs. And in here, create one called set user.ex. This will be our first plug. So def module chat app web dot plugs dot set user, and we'll import plug.con, make an alias chat app.repo and alias chat app.accounts.user. That way we can access the user. And each plug needs to have an init function. Init function takes in the parameters. And then it also has a function called call. And the call takes in the connection and then the parameters. It's sort of, in a way, it's sort of like the setup of like a gen server. So init is a function that gets executed when the plug is initially called, and then call is the callback as a result of init. So after init gets called, call gets called. It's sort of like a gen server in that way. All right, so we don't really care about init in this case, but we do care about call. So we want to say get the user ID, so we'll go plug.con.get session con current user ID. So we get the user ID, and then we could say con do current user equals, if we have a user ID, and repo.get user comma user ID. So if that comes back with a user, then we'll take the connection. We can use assign. This is where the assigns map comes in to create a key in the map with the user itself inside of it. So we can just say current user like this. And then we can also create an assign that'll say like signed in. So this will let us know if the user is actually signed in. And we can bind true with that one. If we don't get the user ID, or the repo isn't able to get the user out of the database, then we can just assign, and actually I'll just copy these two. What we want to do is basically pull these off the connections assigns map. So for the current user, we'll make this nil, and then we'll make signed in false. Because that way, if we don't have a session with the current user ID, that means the user is not signed in. Excuse me. All right, so now we can go to our router, and notice we've got all these plugs here. And in fact, these are all plugs. These are all plugs that are built into Phoenix and into the plug module. And we can use our own plug that we just created in the same way. So we can say plug chat app web plugs dot what do we call it? Set user, and we can just call it like that. And once we do that, now our application will automatically use this plug. So now we can go ahead and let's see, I'll show you how this sort of simplifies things. So if we go to our layout, and where we're checking to see if the user signed in, we can now just call at signed in like this, which is a part of our plug. So instead of having to do it the other way, we can just call to our plug. So signed in plug, pass in the connection, and then this will let us know if the user's signed in. So let's hang on. I don't know why layout view is giving us an error. Is it signed in? It should be signed in. Yeah, it should just be signed in. Let's see. Well, let's check the application, make sure it's working. So sessions new. I think I'm forgetting a step here. Let me rerun it. Let's see, what are you guys still looking at? Okay, you're looking at this. I think the issue here is just how I am calling this in the router, and make sure I'm calling it appropriately. And in the right place. Actually, yes, that's the problem. Actually, no, this should be the right place. Did I forget a part of the plug, perhaps? No, I don't think so. I think everything should be all right. Let me try it again. What are we getting? Layout app, ex app, HTML, da da da. It's not expanding properly, so it's not finding the plug for some reason. And maybe it's because I'm trying to access it from the top level here. So for now, what I'm going to do is just revert these changes real quick so that we can sort of rerun this and then diagnose the problem. All right. All right, so let's sign in here. Not Metalman, but test@test.com. Password. Sign in. Let's not save it. And now let's check to see if we can just use @signed-in. All right, so it's still giving us an error. This should be connected to our, I'm calling it as a function, that's why. There we go. That was really stupid of me. Okay, so you can see now it works. I was calling it as a function by passing the connection in. You didn't have to do that, obviously, because it's just a key on the assigns map. You don't have to pass in the connection. Anyway, so this works. All right, so this allows us to, of course, make it so that we can check to see if the user signed in, and we can find the user wherever we are in our application. So no matter what route we're on, we can go and just query our assigns map and get the user, and the user ID and all that stuff. Now we want to make it so that we can authenticate the user with the plug. That way we can force the user to be signed in for certain actions. So for this, we want to go to our room controller. So controllers, room controller, and in fact, let me close saved, room controller, and I'm going to create a function here down at the bottom. We'll create a private function called auth user, and we'll take in the connection and the params. This is a plug that is essentially just a function, and we'll say if con.assigns signed in. So we're using the plug that we just created. We're checking to see if the user's signed in. If that is in the assigned map, then we'll just return the connection. That means it's fine. Otherwise, we'll say, all right, get the con, put a flash, just says error, or it's a type of error rather, you need to be signed in, like that. And then we'll redirect, and we'll redirect to routes dot. Let's put them at the session path con new, like this, so that they go and they're able to sign in. And then we'll also call halt. Halt will actually stop the connection completely. So the user will then have to reconnect afterwards. So it prevents it from accessing the rest of the plugs in the chain of plugs that we've created. So now, up at the top here of our room controller, we can just say plug, and what do we call this thing? Auth user. We can call it as an atom. So plug auth user when action in, and we want to tie this to new, create, show, and edit, update, and delete. And I probably should have just said not when in, when only in, or when not in, so that they can see everything but the index. All right, let's see if this works. So we're signed in, obviously, so we can create a room. Let me create something like I don't know, the general room. This time I won't delete it. And we'll also create an Elixir room. Talk about Elixir. All right, and when we sign out, let's see if I can go to general. So I try to go to general, and it says you need to be signed in, and it sends us to the login page. If I try to go to Elixir, same thing happens. So now we're completely locked out of all the room routes. So I can't create a room, I can't access any of these rooms without being signed in. So that's one of the cool things about these routes. And actually, let's fix this so that it's not so convoluted. So we can just say when action not, and then instead of putting all these in, we can just say index like this. So when the action is not indexed, don't let the user do anything. That's essentially what we've done here. All right, so it's pretty straightforward, and it's pretty nice. If we wanted to use our module in the same way that we've used our, oh, sorry, of course I didn't show you guys the editor. So I just changed this part here. So if we wanted to use our module instead, say we wanted to bring in, for some reason, use our module, the set user plug, we could just put it in here and use the module atom instead of this atom, and it would work as well in the same way. And so, yeah, doing it this way is pretty useful and certainly very powerful. You can stop parts of your app from doing things depending on certain pieces of code. All right, so let's see. if we wanted to, we could also extract this out into its own module. But really, I mean, I guess it's all right. You might as well do it since we have the plugs folder. So instead of having this file, we can just say auth user.ex and def module. Just call this chat app web.plugs.auth user. And like with our set user, we can import all this stuff. And we also want to import phoenix.controller. And let's just remove all this. We have our init function. This takes in the params that we're not going to use because we're not going to use the init function. And then we also have our call function. So this is con and then params. And this is going to be exactly like the function that we have in our room controller. So we can just grab all this code and just move it over. So just come in here, put it in there like that. And this, let's alias chat app web.router.helper so that we can access the routes in here. And this should be as routes like that. All right, so that should work now. Hang on. Oh, it's helpers, not helper. So it's actually in here. This is what I'm trying to access. Oh no, I'm already calling it. So I guess it's already here. Maybe I had it backwards or something. How did they do it in this? Yeah, it's just, oh, forgot the comma, that's it. Dir. Alright, so that allows us to call routes session path. Alright, and then now in the room controller, we can just remove this private function entirely, and instead we can go ahead and call chat app web.plugs.auth user like that. And this will do exactly the same thing as our function did. What's the error that we're getting here? Oh, probably because I didn't save it. Saying here that call is undefined, even though I know that's not true, and init is undefined, even though I know that's not true. Let's copy it over. There we go. All right, that resolved it. I guess I had a little spelling mistake in there. Oh, auth_user. Okay. Anyway, all right, so now this should function exactly the same as before. No problems. Everything should work. So to take this even further, we've got a few more minutes and should be able to do this. Let me read your guys' questions before I get into this. All right, so Aladdin had the right idea, comment before as. How do the router look? Not really sure what you mean by that. Haran, hopefully I'm saying that right. Diaron, I'm using Code with ligatures right now. Like in this editor, I'm actually using the ligatures. That's why I have the arrows and the triangles and stuff. Anyway, anyway, oh, of course you guys are seeing the app, not the editor. Anyway, so yeah, you can see here's the triangles and the arrows and stuff. That's all ligatures because of fear code. Okay, so to get further, I guess you guys have no questions. If you think of any questions, let me know in the next like 10 minutes because that's probably when I'm going to end. So we want to create a reference between the user's schema and the room schema. And for this, we'll generate a migration. So generate just a blank migration that we can call, or that we can populate. So, and it will allow us to change our room schema so that we can update it to reference users. So for this, I can just call mix ecto.gen.migration, and then we'll just call this add user to room. And you can see here it generates this migration file with our date and the time, and then the name that we just put in there. And let me rerun the app while we're at it. Actually, no. I'm not going to rerun the app right now because we'll have to rerun it after we create our migration. We're going to have to run ecto migrate. So let's go into priv repo migrations, and we'll go to our new migration here. We've got this nice little change function that we can change, and we're going to alter the table, and this should be alter table, and then we put in our table name, which will be rooms, and we want to add the user ID from our users table, and we want this to reference users. So we take the implicit ID from our users table and we add it to our rooms table. So that way each room will be connected to a user. So now let's go back to our terminal, and we can just run mix ecto migrate to migrate this over. And there we go. So we now have a user ID column. And of course, our models are not aware of this, so we need to change that so that that is indeed the case. So let's start with our rooms. So in, not the room controller, but the room itself, we want to go ahead and say belongs to. I wish these didn't give us the quotations. So it belongs to user, and we want to reference chat app.account.user so that it knows where the user schema is. So this belongs to user, and then the user has many rooms attached to it. So we want to use has many, and we can say rooms, and then now we need to reference our rooms schema. So chat app.talk.rooms, like that. And I think it's just room. Chat app.talk.room. Yeah, okay. So there we go. So now they are associated between one another, and I guess now we need to associate the room we're going to create with the current user. So when we create our room in room controller create, we are hiding all the logic inside of our conversation create or our talk create function. I guess the create room function. And what we can do is expand this function. So create room, instead of just passing in the attributes, we can pass in also the con.assigns.current user. So this actually just becomes the user. So the user and then the adders, and we can then change this, say user ecto.build a sock rather. We want to build the sock with our rooms, and let's remove this. Then we're going to call room.changeSet with the adders in it, and then call repo insert. So all we're really doing is changing this top line. And that way, and actually this is going to start to throw an error, or it should throw an error inside of our room controller. So because we call create room with just the room params, but we want to call create room with, rather than just the room params, we want to pass in the con assigns current user and the room params. So I believe that's what we called it. Let's look at our plug real quick. So yes, current user is what we're putting in there. All right, so that is helpful. Let's close saved and room controller. So now when we create a room, it will implicitly bind that user to the room. So now we can go ahead and create an authorized user plug. So the plug will use the user, it'll find out whether or not the user is related to the room, and then we can block the user from editing, updating, or deleting the room, depending on their ID. So let's go ahead and create that in here. I'm going to create a private function, so auth user, let's just call it authorize user. That way we don't mix it up with the auth user function that we created here. Anyway, so params, we'll have a map of our params, and we're looking for the ID, which will be our room ID. And we'll pattern match this with our connection so that we can destruct that room ID out of the connection. Then we can say room equals talk.getRoom, pass in our room ID to get the room from the database, and then we can say if con assigns current user.id equals room.user ID do con else con put flash error you are not authorized, and then redirect. We'll put in to routes.room path, and we want to go to con index, so we'll take them back to the index, and then we'll call halt like that. And we can grab this and add the plug up at the top here. So with this plug too. And we essentially just want to have it cover, edit, update, and delete. So plug authorize user like this when action in edit, update, and delete like that. All right, and we can check this now. So all right. Of course, I don't have a sign-in button here yet anymore. Of course, and I also didn't restart the app. Let's restart the app. I'll put the sign-in button, I guess, before the next stream. But for now, we can just go sessions new. We can sign in with test@test.com. This should be the right password. Alright, so now if I go to general and try to delete, it just tells me that I'm not authorized because I didn't create this room. Or I did create the room, but it doesn't have an association of me with these rooms. And so I can't edit them and I can't delete them. But if I create my own, so like Tensor's room, create it, I can go to it, I can edit it, and of course I can also delete it. And it's not a problem. So that's the power of plugs. You can really use them to selectively say, yeah, this is what you can do and this is what you can't do. And this is what our resources should have access to, and this is what our other resources shouldn't have access to. So yeah, they're pretty cool and they're very composable, and that's what makes them really damn powerful. And actually, they're really easy to make, so that's part of the great thing of Phoenix, really. Alrighty. So Dayron says, shouldn't we put sign up in the nav bar, given the user choice? Yeah, I mean, that's already in there. Obviously, sign in. Like I said, we need to add that, but I'm too lazy to put it in there right now. I'll do it later. Just Mark says, thank you for your Flutter tutorial. I'm not sure which one you're talking about, but no problem. Can we also put that plug in the module we created for the plugs and use it generally? Yeah, you could. You could, of course, just transfer it over to a module like we did with the other one and just use it. You know, you don't even have to make the functions private. I made it private just so that we don't access it outside of the file. But if it's not private, you could still access it anywhere in your app too, and still use it like any other plug. So you can just make them as functions, or you can make them as modules. I do recommend making them as modules because you can get a lot more functionality in them, especially when you add to the init function. There's a lot that you can add in there, but there's nothing that we specifically needed to add in there. Right on, Aladdin. I appreciate that. And thank you all. I know a lot of you guys are from Europe and Asia, so I know it's probably late there. So thanks for staying up with me and watching this tutorial. All right, so I'm going to close out. This is getting a bit longer than I was expecting it to, and I don't want to overdo it. So I'll probably have one more tutorial, which I'll do. And that final tutorial will be on actually wiring up the channels, putting in presence, and even adding like persistence with messages and stuff like that. So I look forward to that, and I hope you guys enjoy it when we create it, and I'll try to get it done by the end of this week, or before the end of this week rather. And then yeah, so yeah, it should be interesting. And all right, guys, well, I'm gonna close out now. Thanks for coming out, and I'll see you guys next time. Oh yeah, by the way, all the code will be in GitHub, so if you want to check it out, go ahead and check it out. All right, guys, see you later.